Hello and welcome to Reality Check, where it's mind over chatter. I'm Stewart Swerdlow, and welcome to another episode. Previously, we've had my wonderful wife Janet as a guest talking about some of her past experiences, and today we have her back again, this time to talk about her special talents in toning. Welcome, Janet, to the show again.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You're always
again.
a welcome addition.
I appreciate that.
And tell us about toning, because most people, I think, don't understand what that means.
Well, it's really kind of interesting because you and I both talk about the original language that emanates from the mind of God. And we describe that as being color, tone, and archetype. But a lot of people don't understand what the tone part of it is. What toning basically means is that you actually get into the frequency of whatever it is that you're trying to understand.
So it's kind of like getting a frequency that's generated from both the shape and the color of whatever it is you're looking at.
Absolutely.
And how do you apply that to human beings?
Well, interestingly enough, you can apply that in any way that you want, because everything, for instance, verbiage, words have a sound. And when you hear the sound, that tells you what's really going on within that person. A person may say to you, I'm fine, but the sound behind the words may not match the words. And so if you can go into the sound behind that, you'll find out what's really going on with that person.
So it's kind of like a tuning fork, where the tone goes out, hits the vibration of that person, then they start vibrating in a certain way, and then it feeds back to whoever's doing the tone.
Absolutely.
So how do you know what kind of tone to emit?
Well, first of all, you have to understand what's out here before you can understand what's in here. And that's why I talk about listening to the words that other people are saying. And even yourself sometimes, if somebody will say to you, how are you feeling? You say, I'm okay, but inside you're not feeling that way. That emits a tone that actually the other person hears. And vice versa. If I ask you how you are, and you say you're fine, but you're not, that also emits a tone. So because of my sensitivities, I can feel and hear that tone is not in sync with you. So when I actually want to understand your particular mind pattern, all I really have to do is go into the mind pattern or the tone that the mind pattern is emitting without your words.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you subconsciously or through a hyperspace perspective look at the person, and something within you tells you what frequency and tone to emit?
Actually, I go up to my oversoul. My oversoul talks to the other person's oversoul and brings that tone to me. And as I play the tone within my body, I go into that frequency, and then I understand it because I'm in the middle of the frequency. And the example I like to use is, for instance, if I ask you what is a stomach. Well, you know what a stomach is because you have one and you're in the middle of it. You know what it feels like when it's full. You know what it feels like when it's empty, or if you've eaten too much, or if you're ill with a virus. All those have different feelings, and you understand what a stomach is because you're in the middle of that frequency. The stomach frequency, you explore it without words, you know. So in the same way, I actually get into the middle of the frequency via the oversoul level, and because I'm in the middle of the frequency, then I understand what it means, and I can explain your own tones back to you that perhaps you have blocked out yourself.
So how would it work? For example, let's say you're looking at someone's digestive system, and you emit the tone that will vibrate against that particular energy. How does it look to you as far as reading it or knowing what is it saying?
Well, for instance, what I would do is I would, on the oversoul level, ask for the tone for the digestive system. And as I play that particular tone, I know what a digestive system that is in perfect health should feel like, and if it's not in that perfect health, then I ask to do a scan with the tone to show me where the blocks are, where the tone is not flowing freely, where it might be a darker tone or a lighter tone or heavier or that sort of thing. And if it's off from what a normal frequency should be, then I know there's an issue there, and I can go up to the oversoul and ask for explanation of what that particular issue is in accordance with the tone that I receive.
And can you, with a tone, then correct it?
I can, but it's like all things, it depends on that person's ability to receive it. In fact, I even have some people ask me to do long-distance toning for them, which I can do that. However, it's like any kind of work you do, true healing comes from within the person. You can say it is a crutch or an aid, but basically that person has to correct the mind pattern in order to hold the correction that is made by tone.
And so if you're looking at a person's heart, would the frequency or the tone for the heart of that person be the same for another person? Would each person's heart tone be different?
It's actually very interesting. I've always heard the tones, and I've always played with the tones. Somebody finally suggested to me that I use it for my healing work. That's when I really started exploring the tones seriously. And I originally started out with working with the tones of the earth. And I got into the heartbeat, what I considered the tone of the song of the earth. And as I did that, I got into the frequency and I felt at one with the earth as if I was a part of that. And I began to ask the earth questions about the history and the origin and humankind and all those kind of things, and I got answers back. And I went back and forth and played the tones, and as I played the tone, I knew everything that I needed to know about the earth, and from there I went into other various physical aspects of this reality, and from there, on down to people and myself. So it actually has been a kind of an interesting journey that I would say I'm still on, that I still learn so much about this through the sound.
Now, you've been starting to give seminars and lectures on toning, and I know you did one several months ago that was quite successful. How did it feel hearing all these other new people toning all at the same time, and how did you coordinate all of that?
It was very fascinating because it was actually the first time that I've taught a group of people. And we start out with the known sounds and what those mean. For example, if an airplane flies overhead, most people know that's an airplane. So they don't have to stop and consciously label. Or if a book drops or a door slams or things or tones that we already know the meaning of without really stopping and labeling. If you played those tones for people in a different culture, they wouldn't have a clue of what that meant. If they heard a door slam and they're used to living in an igloo or in a hut, or the different variety of modalities, the nomads, that maybe have the yurts, and they wouldn't know the sound of a door slamming. They wouldn't necessarily know the sound of an airplane going overhead or a book dropping, all different sounds. So I kind of liken it to that we're really learning a whole new language through sounds. You just have to go back and find that out. So that's how we started in the seminar, was everybody would make certain sounds, and then we would guess, what does this sound mean? So we started with the known sounds, and from there then we began to go into more the unknown sounds. And very successful. Even I was amazed at how far they got. And in the beginning, people were nervous, but the more they got into it and stopped trying to imitate me and got into their own sounds, the more that their abilities increased to actually read. And we eventually got up to doing body scans for other people using sound alone, and the information they came up with was amazing.
And in your opinion, how difficult is it to recreate the sounds you might hear in hyperspace with the human voice? Is it possible to physically recreate the sounds with a human vocal cord?
I think, considering the dimension that we work at and the density, it's not going to be in 100% perfect alignment, but I do believe that by going on the oversoul level, you can come relatively close, I'm going to say, all things considered and being equal here. It's the same thing as trying to replicate hyperspace colors.
Right.
You can to a degree. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be close, say, with prisms and lights and things like that.
Do you think it's possible to create a computer program that would actually create the exact tones that you hear in hyperspace?
I don't know, because it's digital, and digital is different. There are breaks in digital
frequencies.
Yes, versus something that you would make with the voice itself. So I would be interested and curious, but I don't know if it would be exactly as well as the human voice could do it.
Have you ever come across a situation where you tried to get a tone from somebody and it was just totally blocked, or you could not get a reading on it?
No, I can't say that. I do say sometimes the tones aren't always beautiful and wonderful, or maybe grating on somebody's ears are difficult to take. And I tell people that's because the experiences that you have had then are grating on your ears are difficult to take. And so when you hear those tones played back to you, you have a natural aversion to it, or you want to recoil a bit from it. But if you can get yourself through that and get that horrible, awful experience out, then you can get into the tones that maybe are more soothing to your soul, so to speak. And that's usually where I start. When I do my toning work, I usually start with where the person is. And so we make a statement of what the person is with the tone. Then from there, we make a statement with the tone of opening it up to accept something else, and finally of sealing it. And then from there, it's up to the person, because I also give mental work with it that they have to do. I do suggest that people learn to do their own toning, that they know their own frequency through sound, just like they need to know their own colors and the own archetypes that make up who and what they are. Color, tone, and archetype, the original language, which is really where all of us come from.
Do you think anybody could learn how to make tones and and hear the tones of other people?
Absolutely. People are afraid to communicate. People are closed down in their throat chakra. And so it's very difficult then for them to get past the feeling of being embarrassed or somebody's going to hear them. But that's not what this is about. This is about being able to state who and what you are. Not the verbiage that humankind has given to you, but the verbiage that actually you get directly from the mind of God.
What do you do with people who feel that they don't have a good voice and they're afraid to say tones, especially in public or in a group situation? How do you get the person to a point where they're able to do this or feel comfortable?
Actually, there's a couple of ways. First of all, I tell people to go in your own shower and turn the shower on. The water is an amplifier, and nobody really can hear you because you've got your shower going, and play with the tones that way. Second of all, in a group, if you put 3 or 4 people together, you can't really tell who's making what sound. And what happens is you allow yourself to become freer, the tones really become quite magnificent, and even people who've tried it for the first time are amazed at what comes out of them.
And do you think that salt water has a better effect on toning than fresh water?
I think it depends on your purpose, what you're looking for. Salt water is more buoyant and is a very good amplifier. But I think that just depends on what your goals are. Everything is specific for a purpose.
What are some of the things you can accomplish through toning?
Well, the first thing is usually just even a statement of who and what you are really, not what you think you are, what other people are telling you you are. You can, if you have other people's frequencies in you, which a lot of times people accept the frequencies of their parents or their siblings or their spouses or perhaps their co-workers. They have all these frequencies that live within you, and I can hear that. I can hear what the original frequency is versus the frequencies that other people accept. So we can take those frequencies out on the oversoul level and give them back where they belong and help to clear up the auric field. So we can do that kind of clearing work with people. We can also help to put the body back in alignment, the mental and emotions back in alignment. But again, there has to be the mind work behind that. The person has to do their mental work. Otherwise, nothing will stay. The body will go back. They'll call the other people's frequencies back in. You can also explore physical reality. You can explore other realities. You can explore angelic frequencies. You can explore other societies, other timelines, all that through tone, because everything has a specific tone. You just have to get into that tone and hook up with your oversoul so you have the explanation on a vertical level rather than a horizontal level.
I remember at one time at a seminar, you broke the entire group into sections, and each were given a color of the body, let's say the pale red or the ice blue, and you asked them to tone those colors, and it was very successful. And you actually could feel and see those colors when the people were toning in that frequency. So if you're looking at your own body, how do you do that? Do you move your center of consciousness into a particular section of the body and tone from there mentally? Or do you just do it verbally and connect to that section of the body?
What I would do is I would go down to my feet we'll say the brown area, which you talk about in your work. I would go into the brown area and do a tone that I could feel vibrate in that particular part of my body, and that would be the tone for brown. And then into the pale red chakra band and do one that I could feel vibrate there, and a tone into the next section and continue up my body. And when you're in the correct color, and in the correct frequency, you can actually feel that in your body. It's amazing. You can do that for yourself. You can go in and feel it vibrate in your chest area or in the top of your head or in your pineal gland area. And it was very interesting to watch that happen. And the other interesting thing that is in a group setting is when you have different people doing each section of the body and then they all do it together. That's what's really amazing, because it is so harmonious and it does feel so good because your whole system vibrates. And it's not just something I feel. The participants feel it. People who are toning feel it. And I talk about this a lot. Don't believe it just because I say it, but do it. This is an experiential thing that you can participate in. And you can feel it and you can know it. There's something here. And then from once you acknowledge there's something, then you can start to explore and investigate for yourself.
How does music correlate to toning?
Well, I'm not a musician. I have heard people say that I do not. Well, I had one professional musician tell me that the sounds that I make, or the tones that I make go in between the notes of the scale that we use here in the United States. I can't say if that's true or not true because I don't really correlate it to quote-unquote normal music.
As someone who's sensitive to tones and frequencies, how do you see music that's played on the radio, for example? How does that affect you, or how does the tones
I have
feel
a hard
to you?
time with that because I hear and feel all the ELF that comes through and all the multi-layers, and I don't like it. I can deal with it, but it's not really what I like to hear.
Is there a type of music that you feel it has a good tone quality to it that's helpful to people?
I believe like if you can really go before the stringed instruments, which are good for the heart area, or brass instruments, really go into the symphony type orchestra music and go to not necessarily that which has been pre-recorded, but if you can have live music, I think that's where you get the frequency.
It's been said that violin music, or the strings in the violin, can simulate human voice quality. So in your opinion, do you think a violin can be used to replicate tones for a person?
No, I believe that you might be able to use that for specific parts of the person. For instance, string instruments are usually good to help animate the heart area. And you can find out what vibrates within your body, but not in the same way, not in the overall way that the human voice can.
What about children whose perhaps their voices are not developed quite enough? Can they do toning?
Absolutely, because it's developed for themselves and their experiences at that particular point in time. And that's really all it's about, is you exploring yourself through sound. Just like when we talk about how the colors, you know, if you wear specific colors, they're easier to see on your body. That means something. Everybody has a tone. You know, most people just aren't attuned to that they're hearing something. Or as I mentioned earlier, people talk in a voice. You may have a very calm, straight, even voice to the normal ear. I can hear if you're angry. I can hear if you're resentful. I can hear if you're bitter. I see all the colors in there. I can hear if you're jealous. I can hear if you feel guilty. I can hear if that it's not your words, but something that your parents told you, you know, when you're the age of 3. My hearing is very, very sensitive, and I pick up all those things. And so I do a lot of filtering on the oversoul level so that I can deal with people on a more normal basis. But it is, you know, it isn't something that I deal with.
Let's say somebody lost their voice or can't produce a sound. Can they mentally create a tone and project that out? And if so, would that have the same effect as if someone verbally did it?
Yes. In fact, technically, I don't need to create the tone to get the information. It's a way of focusing, and also it helps relax other people because they're not so intense on what is going on with me. You know, it kind of defocuses. But yes, the tone could be done mentally, and you can get your tones mentally. You don't have to use the voice to recreate that.
What effect do you think on the toning is there when you're in a public place, let's say at a seminar in a hotel, for example, and you're doing either a singular or group toning, and there are others outside of the room or in another area that hear that and maybe don't understand it and might send negative energies towards that? How does that affect the toning, if at all?
Well, actually, how other people respond does not affect what you are doing. However, what you are doing does affect your environment and other people. And so I'm very, very cautious about where I make my tones and how. Like if somebody would say, will you tone right now for just because I want to hear you, if there is no particular purpose for it, I won't do it because it does change the environment. Sound changes, sound creates, sound destroys. And so whatever you do, you want to think about what's happening to your environment and to the people around you. And so I'm very careful about how I use my tones.
And that's interesting because recent experiments have shown that when they take a particular sound or vibration on sand, the sand forms into a particular shape. And even producing certain tones for plants create different growth rates and health in the plant. So it's very important to be careful of the sounds and tones that you make and the effects it has on the environment. You're always talking about words and how words affect people and what's around you. Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. Your word has a color, it has a tone, and it has a shape. And so what a lot of people do, and of course I do a very basic, but if somebody says, I'm afraid I'm going to be late, the word afraid has a color, It has a tone and it has a shape. And if you say, I am afraid, even though you may not be thinking fear at that time, but you're really thinking, you're consciously focusing on being late, because you have the color, the tone, and the archetype for fear, that's what you're imprinting in your auric field with. So I tell people you have to be careful of your words because of what you're really imprinting yourself with. You need to change that, and that's going to change your environment or your auric field. And then that's going to change how the outer world reflects back to you. So you have to be very careful of your words and the color that you send out. That's another thing people don't realize. If they talk, and that's why I say I hear in color as well as sound. So if you tell me everything is fine, but I hear and I see red coming out of your mouth, that is telling me something different. And most people don't stop and label the colors of their words or what's actually coming out of their mouth. And so they might be sending red into their environment or an anger energy, and they don't know, they don't have a clue why anger is coming back at them. Well, if you give red out, red's going to come back, and you get this cycle going. So you have to stop that. And of course, I talk about, you can do that, of course, by releasing it through sound, by releasing it through the top of your head to your oversoul. But the sound is all around you, and it's continually creating, and people just don't have a clue of what they're setting up with the sounds that come out their mouth or the words that they speak.
So what happens when, for example, someone's having a conversation and they'll say something in a certain tone, but behind the tone is a different color that doesn't match the tone? Would that be, let's say, a lie or deception? For example, you could tell someone that you love them in a very sweet voice, but you really mean something else. So what effect does that have on the person receiving that information and tone?
Well, usually then that person is going to respond in like kind. If they are not really consciously aware of the colors, they could say the words back, but they may not have that same thing underneath them. There may not be a love relationship there, even though the words are saying certain things. And that's why sometimes people will say, well, their words sounded hollow. The words probably really are hollow, but they don't go take it further to think about the color that came out. Or if a person is lying, there are certain frequencies that actually would belong to a lie, and usually they're like puffs of smoke that come out of their mouth if a person is lying, or holes in the auric field. So, and as you become more sensitive to the tones and to the colors or to the archetypes, all of those things come more to the forefront of a person's consciousness, and they actually begin to see and know and hear and feel all these things. It's just we're not taught this from little children. As little children, we're taught linearly. We're taught about, these are eyes, this is nose, this is a mouth. We're not taught about all these things out here. We're not taught to listen to the sound, so we kind of begin to ignore it and push all this internal knowledge away and go out linearly into our lifeline. And as we do that, we lose that knowledge, unfortunately. But it is innately there. We just have to go back and remember it and uncover what we really have suppressed within ourselves.
So that everything in existence really has a sound or tone.
Yes.
And that's what's been referred to in ancient times as the music of the spheres.
Yes.
Do you notice, let's say, artwork or whatever it may be, whether it's a painting or poetry or a statue, does that have a tone that it emits constantly?
Yes, everything does. Everything that you create is color, tone, and archetype. Everything has an effect on the environment. If you go out into a really pristine or pure environment, you will notice that, we're going to say what the quote-unquote normal person would hear. You can hear the streams, the ripple of the stream. You can hear the rush of the wind. You can hear the leaves that are rustling. There is a natural harmony in all the sounds that it emits. And if you go further into that, into the sounds of creation that actually created the water streams or the rocks or the trees or the wind, you can hear those tones as well as you're saying the music of the spheres. It does exist. I've heard it. And it is really, really beautiful. What happens with humankind is that they don't take those sounds into consideration when they build their buildings or they plant their gardens. And so it disrupts this natural, harmonious sound of nature or the music of the spheres. And that's what is grating against humankind. If you worked with the sounds that already exist, you'd have really wonderful harmonies, but people don't do that. And so we have a lot of discordance that then again is played off of with, like I was talking about earlier, the sounds on the radio, the ELF, the natural disharmony that humankind has created is just played on and exacerbated increasingly. So it becomes more and more difficult to hear who and what you are in amongst all this other what is the word, cacophony?
Cacophony.
Cacophony of sound.
So even if you're out in the wilderness, by listening to the tone of the water, you know if it's safe to drink, or
Yes.
listening to the tone of a plant to see if it's okay to eat that.
Absolutely, and you can go into that frequency, and you can practice that. And the way you can do that is you can practice with something that you know is safe to eat.
How about even with the people that are around you, so that you know who is it safe to be with, or who is dangerous?
As long as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the tones, you can start in the outer, because that's where most of us are. And so if the tone is okay, you can give that up to your oversoul. Do I need to look deeper and deeper and deeper? If it's not okay, do I need to look deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the tone until you can find out what it is that's around you? And as you develop your sensitivities and you get a heightened awareness of that, you just automatically get into that state of knowing by knowing of what's around you. And I talk a lot about how every cell in your body really has its own consciousness. And so it's hearing already. You know, the cells in my feet are hearing just as much as the cells in my ears, so to speak.
And in the future, you'll be doing seminars for toning, both on all different levels for people who want to join that. As well, we're kind of out of time. And even though I'm married to you, I still think you're a fascinating person and a great guest. And so once again, it's been a pleasure to be with you on Reality Check. Hopefully that you will learn more about toning and try it for yourself and see what a difference it makes in your own life. Janet will always be doing seminars in the future, and you should check to see when and where they'll be taking place. So from Reality Check, this is Stewart Swerdlow signing off. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.